Hey everyone, welcome to the Apeid magazine. I am your host, Mark, and today we're going to be talking about social media. Yes, a big topic, but we're going to get into it, and I've got a few ideas I would like to put forth. Before I do that, though, I would like to compel you, entreat you, cajole you, coax you to subscribe and like the channel. As you can see, it's new. I'm trying to grow this, and I would like to get some support behind it. So if you are interested in discussing all manner of topic in a good faith way, please join the group and participate. I would greatly appreciate it. Anyway, today we are looking at a Substack article I wrote a while back when I was thinking a lot about social media and trying to get to the root of the nature of social media and posting and commenting and all of that stuff and how it has affected public discourse. So I called this article Society Media because you will see I want to change the name of social media. I don't think it's very social. But in fact, since then, I've kind of changed my position. I think we should call it public media. But I do encourage you to go to the Substack page and read the article through and through and get a better sense of it. I'm going to be jumping through it a bit and offering some commentary if I think anything needs a little more elaboration and elucidation. All right, let's get into it. Social media, society media, public media, the unfettered hive mind. And as you can see in my graphic, I'm sort of looking at this and how it affects our minds and the nature of public discourse. All right, let's start with the introduction here. At the advent of Gutenberg's movable type printing press, the literate class opined that in popularizing the written word, propagation of the unsophisticated ramblings of the common mind would put us on the road to perdition. We need not now parse the implications of medieval ruling classes' hand-wringing, having experienced the liberalizing force that access to the written word has had, but to say that they were at least somewhat correct. So this is a word salady way of saying that, in the idea of the ruling classes, the authority classes, giving access to publishing to the common people will, create all manner of hell, I guess, is the idea. And I'm sort of suggesting that they're not necessarily wrong, even though they weren't totally right. A literate society and a free press has shown us the unresolvable inconvenience, though, that the swayers of dominant social philosophy do not have exclusive rights to accuracy and authority, and that hoi polloi, the commoners, cannot lay sole claim to idiocy. This is my flowery way of saying that the ruling classes, do not own the idea of accuracy. They are not the voice of authority always. And the commoners have some very grassroots efforts that have come up over the years that have shown that they are not necessarily the idiots that the authoritative classes think of them. In fact, in the realm of public discourse, the two groups are mutually parasitic. They rely on each other. A pleb wishing to propagate a notion has heretofore had to don the trappings of the ivory tower, even when that notion was to tear down said tower. That means they have to adopt the language of academics, of public discourse, and they have to follow some of the standards of writing in order to get published, etc., and sometimes they even wear a tie. Even when that notion was to tear down the tower, right? While the literati has depended on the intellectual shortcomings of the masses in order to stand above them and be heard. Even when said literatus was once a pleb. So what I'm saying is publishing is rooted in social mobility, right? Presenting yourself as an expert on something and publishing a book or some article or something like that that gets some traction, or even being just a public figure for whatever reason, gives you some standing in society. But in a lot of cases, especially in modern times, those are grassroots movements, right? Social media, like the printing press, has not diminished the voice of authority posturing of those who would publish on it, despite the lofty ideals of its progenitors. What I mean here is that in the early days of social media, we sort of had this kumbaya feeling that everything was going to be great and we're just going to have a nice public discourse and it's going to be a great exchange of ideas. but that has not worked out in that way. Accordingly, if social media is the cesspool of the unfettered hive mind that its detractors take it for, then we must change its moniker to society media or public media, because it is the head of society cracked open and laid bare, not a reflection of mores of social interaction. Some people pronounce that as mores. I've always pronounced it as mores. Tomato, tomato. We must also then concede that opening up publishing to the masses has turned out to be as bad an idea as limiting it. In short, we are always on the road to perdition, no matter who controls the presses. I know that's a fairly cynical view, but my idea here is just that limiting access to the written word is a bad idea, and letting everybody publish on it is also a bad idea. It sort of works out the way we expect it to. The voice of authority model of vetting knowledge attempts to canonize only quality ideas by putting gates around the medium and affording franchise rights to speak only to those deemed worthy. Editing and vetting, however, is by nature a form of censorship. And as it should be in a liberal society, it is more of a filter than a plug. However, especially if the ostensible goal is to hear the chorus. The goal of a literate society is to have more voices presented. However, the editing and gatekeeping put around the publishing world, of course, limits and vets and edits those things, which is, in some sense, a form of censorship. However, any resulting dialectic is only fruitful if those people recognize and adopt the higher principle produced, which we do from time to time, but rarely in unison. And what I'm saying here is that the people have to have a good faith or make a good faith effort to adopt the higher ideas that come out of public discourse. And that is a sort of a moral argument, but it doesn't always work out that way, as we are learning. As well, and here's the important part, all voices must be heard. In order to have a robust dialectic in our society, a robust public discourse, we have to hear all voices, even if it's just with the intention of throwing away the garbage, meaning the bad ideas, and trying to narrow down which ones rise up as the good ones. And that process is the sausage making of public discourse, as we are all learning. Thus far, the voice of authority standard has been equally unsuccessful at ensuring a lack of idiocy amongst the literate classes, as it has at tamping down the mindless rambling of the laity, and neither matter if you live in a society where the most influential gatekeeper, meaning a media outlet or a public publishing house or TV station, something like that, is paid to entertain and whittles the subject of any key idea down to a soundbite. And this is the complaint about politics, about news. Everything is digestible and whittled down to its smallest, most accessible point. A population that does not read and draws its conclusions about its world by content already conforming to and rarely challenging its predilections. This is the idea of confirmation bias, right? We don't read things, but we do grab onto things that confirm our pre-existing notions and make us feel good about that. In this way, media have changed little since times pre-Gutenberg, and the gatekeepers manage as well as ever to spin the message in their favor. It's becoming evident to me, anyway, that social media is still controlled by voices of authority, by institutions, and they do as good a job as ever at manipulating public messaging. So the idea that dispersing the authority to publish hasn't done anything to actually help people understand propaganda, be able to read a little better, or anything like that. It really just allows them a bigger magnifying glass under which to spread their messages. So what did the powers that were also get wrong about popularizing the written word through accessible and affordable media? The quantitative easing of liberalism on free speech did not open the floodgates of public discourse until today. Nor did it serve to provide holistic enlightenment to the public at large, as internet-based social media has made abundantly clear. And that's kind of my cynical view, that it hasn't done much to enlighten the public. So the idea that publishing things, giving everybody the access to knowledge, would make everybody wiser and brighter. And of course it does educate, and people are more well informed than they were in the past, but it doesn't necessarily make us more wise. Access to knowledge has only managed to change or diversify what we consider knowledge, but it is still relegated only to those who choose to seek it, and it does little to ensure universal wisdom on when informing what to do with it, right? We have always been at odds in society about what to do with things, technology, new ideas, etc., and we've always had those who are against certain ideas and those who are for it. And we don't have any unifying notions about what to do with certain ideas once they are presented. If algorithms reveal anything about society, it is that there is no consensus on what is valuable in the realm of knowledge and its acquisition. Two individuals are citizens of very different realms on YouTube, so much like they would be in the stacks at the library or on the TV dial. Any disappointment one feels about the unified field hypothesis of human intellectual endeavor that centuries of public education and public discourse would enjoin once the technology arrived to translate at Babel is merely the result of an overinflated estimation of unifying human virtues. And what I'm saying here is, again, a very cynical view that this idea that if we could just enjoin discourse in a sort of common field or a common room or something like that, it would somehow be distilled because humans are all unified and we all sort of want the same things. And social media is sort of revealing that if you think that way, you just have an overinflated view of how unified humans are. And we are becoming more siloed off and more tribal due to social media. Next section, and I've got the likes to prove it. As it is impossible to be well-versed on everything, even the most informed among us harbor some variety of half-baked notion and misconception, right? You can't know everything. We all walk around having some hazy impression of things we don't know much about. Right? The majority of any population relies on a small subset of knowledge and leaves the rest to hazy impressions or parroting of conventional wisdom. That means if you don't know something well enough, all you can do is reflect what most people think about it, or what the common or the conventional wisdom is on that topic, right? A frighteningly large portion of the population battle the scourge of accuracy with a deep understanding of wholly unsubstantiated expertise, while a visible percentile seem to know nothing about anything and appear to willfully ignore any illuminating factoid that may drift within their purview. I think that one is scathingly clear. Despite these limitations, no one goes through life without a completed view of our world and the universe at large. We all trade in wholesale accretions of impressions, summations, and determinations to complement that which our solipsistic experience cannot and does not tell us. And what I'm saying here is that even though we all understand that we don't know everything, we're not familiar with many things, we are certainly not experts in most things, we all have some impression of anything that we know about. Even knowledge of not knowing compels humans to generate comforting conclusions about the sum and sundry that propagate through the ether. So even when you know nothing about something, you still develop some impression of it, some opinion of it, some judgment of it. It is a most human trait, it is a most human of traits and a talent of rarefied benefit and consequence, right? We are the only animals who are able to do that. It is also a human trait to come to care for and even depend on these self-imposed narratives as that which we feel we know well and true tend to make up our constructed social selves. That means if you believe something, it's part of you. You personalize it. You take it personally when someone challenges those beliefs and ideas, especially if they are religious or spiritual, or they are things that you have had, things that you have known or believed for a long time. What is a social animal with a unicorn who sees unicorn's perception to do? That means we believe we are special and we believe we see special things. When you are afforded a ticket behind the velvet ropes of public discourse, you dig in. So this means what people do when they are faced with challenges to their worldview, they fight back, right? They don't question. That OG influencer of the Middle Ages, Martin Luther, managed to pitch Europe into centuries of religious violence with a post nailed to a door. No social media post, despite its reach, has ever achieved such traction. So we're talking about the idea that posting on social media is not a new thing. We've always had pamphleteers and things like that. And one of the most famous of those posts is Martin Luther's 95 Theses, which he tacked to a door in a church in Germany. Yeah, talk about going viral. We can assume by its uptake that Martin Luther was not the only one of his time to share the sentiments expressed, but his public pronouncements singled him out within the Protestant movement. This compulsion to be a Martin Luther, to speak truth to power, to subvert the errant order, to be a moral standard bearer, to decode the WYSIWYG and expose the HTML, to ferret out the glitches in the matrix, is a potent fantasy of empowerment and approbation that we all entertain. To me, this is one of my main notions about how people engage social media. We all think we know everything, but mostly we would like to be like Martin Luther, to post our idea and have everybody go, wow, you're right, you've really nailed it, yeah. And that's why social media, YouTube, right, it's all about, uncovering the truth, blasting the facts, owning the other group, whatever it is. It's this idea that you present this idea that you have and thereby reprogram the entire thing. We all yearn to be the soothsayer whose comforting conclusions become the 95 theses that change and shape the world, but few of us have the requisite time, confidence, will, bona fides, or maniacal fervor to attempt to promulgate them publicly. So most of us are contented to air the distillations of our worldview or vent our spleens across the dinner table, over drinks at bars, in the occasional school-assigned epistle, or meet them out over the years-long brainwashing programs we call child-rearing. For the most part, these utterances and exchanges materialize, then vaporize. But they ultimately tint the pixels that make up our image of the social spectrum. Taxonomy takes over. We form caucus with those with whom we concur, and ignore and revile those with whom we do not. And society lumbers on until it doesn't, despite the fact that to each of us, there are smart and safe people that we agree with, and dumb and dangerous people that we do not. So, what is it about publishing this dithering amalgam of public consciousness that creates such a moral panic? So the question is, why is it such a moral panic for people to hear things that they disagree with? In short, it is that we have seen it before. Retrospection does little to help us identify whether a social media pamphleteer is a Martin Luther, or a Hammurabi, or a suffragette, or a Voltaire, or a Mao, or a Goebbels, or a moralizing teetotaler of the local temperance league. Right? It means when you hear something that you don't like, you're not sure, is this person the next Hitler or a terrorist? Or if you're the government, is this a Martin Luther who's going to tear everything down? Is this a Voltaire who is satirizing me and making me look like a fool? People have these harsh reactions because it's so immediate and it comes at them one every day, right? Amongst the public as a whole, only fear or confirmation bias tells us whether the latest epistle is the next Bible or Unabomber's manifesto. But we all have a sense of the power of the published word and its tendency to be adopted, adapted, and consecrated into that which becomes the reality in which we live, for better or for worse. So that means we all understand the power of language and the power of the promulgated idea and how it can be picked up by groups, and those groups can grow and they can become political movements or social movements or cultural forces. And if we don't like that idea, if we don't like that notion or that direction, we fear its outcome, that it will influence us and take over our lives, right? That's the moral panic. This is your brain on short form. Social media is a short form text, right? 140 characters, 280 characters, whatever it is. One aspect of social media age that we cannot be sure of is whether we were already as we are online or whether being online has made us this way. That is to say, in removing the gatekeepers and turning us each of us into publishers, has the opportunity to remove the filters built into our public personas created Frankenstein's monster? Or were we already monsters, but we weren't aware of it because we hadn't a wall to project it on? It is more comforting to assume the latter, because then social media is merely an extension of an already improving and more peaceful world. Assuming the former takes on the air of a Walking Dead type techno-tragedy diverting us onto the dystopian turnpike. Which means if you think that social media is turning us into monsters, it means you think the world is going to fall apart and become a dystopia. If you think that we were monsters before that, you're kind of like, well, it's just the way we have always been, and things will probably improve as they have been for years. The point is, we are running this experiment in real time, and the only test group we have is the world before the internet. Which means we are watching it happen and we don't know what the outcome is going to be. Had I the foresight to transcribe the discussions perpetrated at the family dinners of my pre-internet childhood, it would read like a tidy distillation of Breitbart, 4chan, a conspiracy-minded chat group, comment section trolls, a comedy routine that would get you deplatformed, and long arguments about minutiae that Google now settles in an instant. So I am one of those pre-internet people. I remember when social media was actually just dinner talk, and it looks the same. People are sometimes crude, ignorant, unfair, opinionated, hurtful, and being so, willing to shout it across the room. We say a lot of things we don't really mean, but we always mean things that we publish. We get behind it, right? We support it. Social media imprints that into the canon, which means it becomes part of the permanent record. In terms of content, there is not much new that social media has generated, but being published and propagated leads people to fear that messages that they find objectionable will manifest, and sometimes they will, but not often, and no more so than previously. Dangerous people have not needed the internet to organize in the past. People we find disagreeable did not suddenly appear when the internet's switch was thrown. What it does do newly, though, is convert the stream of consciousness that represents the breadth and brine of social psyche into a permanent record in such a way as we haven't had to deal with before. Social media platforms are still nothing more than media, and as interactive as they may be, they present nothing more than content. And the characteristics and consequences of the production and purveyance of content hasn't changed since cave dwellers attempted to interpret their world on cave walls, right? A cave wall painting is still the same as social media. It's still media in terms of communication. The instant that one endeavors to convey a message outside of the immediacy of a real-time, person-to-person context, a host of inherent problems arise. Here are the problems. First and foremost is the breadth of possible communication suffers. Social media is a poor communicator. It is lacking certain parts of communication that would make it more wholesome or fulsome. Secondly, contextual understanding becomes extremely limited. You can only say so much in a short amount of time, and often the message is lacking context. Thirdly, the moment-to-moment flexibility that can be accomplished in real life must be stabilized, if not eliminated, right? I'm making this video here. I don't talk like this normally, so take that for what it's worth. Additionally, communication becomes largely unidirectional, producer toward end user. On top of these limiting features of content-based communication, internet-based social media presents the additional problem of the fact that many people are poor communicators in general, and in written language, worse. I actually put myself into this. I don't find myself to be a great communicator. I always strive to be a little better at using language and explaining myself. But anybody that peruses social media with a critical eye will realize most people do not write very well. That is to say, they don't express themselves very clearly, and they don't use vocabulary very well. And this causes, so many miscommunications and so many communication problems. It's safe to say that social media content is very poorly communicated ideas. Traditionally, we have contended with these problems of platformed communication through rigid standards of writing and a preference for long-form expression, which the internet is in fact exceptional at providing. Right? Here's one of the shames of the internet. It was going to be the great library of the world with access to great content and ideas. The problem is it's long-form. Right? And the problem with long-form communication is that it's long and people don't read it. As successful as Reddit, Substack, and online news services may be, the general public like their biases confirmed in short, digestible, easily repeated snippets with all the intellectual fuss of a drive-by shooting. Right? This is that very notable part of the internet. The soundbite, the snippet, the headline, the content lacking sort of presentation. It is Twitter, not the latest thesis issued from the University of Toronto Press, that provides context for news. And short-form commentary exploits the chief advantages of the internet: immediacy, reach, and recall. So one of the things that makes the internet or social media content different is the idea of immediacy. 20 years in, we are starting to see the problems of reach and recall when mixed with an accelerant like immediacy. One entertains all manner of objectionable and detestable thoughts. It is part of intellectual development to swish an idea around a few times before you decide to adopt or reject it. Whoever thought that providing this changeable being, meaning humans, full of such vagaries and prevarications with a portable printing press that is not only dissuasive of sober second thought, but rewards fire with gasoline, wouldn't prove right those medieval naysayers, has seemingly never met a human, or they have and they don't care. This whole notion here is this idea that the way that people think, we sort of throw around thoughts in our head, we throw one out, we take one in, we like it, we dislike it, we keep some, we throw some away. Having a printing press in your hand where you can just immediately tap out an idea or a thought that you might have without the pausing for second thought and sort of thinking to yourself, oh, wait a minute, there's this I got to consider. That is a dangerous thing. So social media rewards the explosive thought, right? The anger, the rage, the emotional side of things. Close the comment section, save the world. As is the case with all media platforms, the incendiary exceptions that push the envelope of social mores are the ones that are groomed by media outlets into representations of more pervasive trends. A racist post is indicative of a racist society. A murder means none of us are safe. A regional war is a sign of a looming doomsday scenario. It is the modality of media to tease the crop for blights and call it a plague. This is the facet of media that social media is. We sort of look at it as common people expressing their views on things, but it's still media, which means it has this idea that we take the little exception, the poignant idea, and we blow it up for exposure and impact. And all media functions this way. To feature the tall blades that make you think the grass is too long. That is taking the exception to define the rule. Social media and its algorithms is an automation of this modality, but it is still the exploitation of the visceral response. So we all understand algorithms are designed for engagement. Engagement is done through visceral and emotional response. You leverage that to get exposure, right? The worthiness of a point made, a topic explored, or a story told is evaluated only by the reaction it garners. That means we don't look at the quality of the idea, we don't look at the quality of the content or the quality of the story, we look at the reaction it gets. And this brings to bear the old adage that if many people believe something, it must be true, which means if many people like something, it must be good. But if anything, history shows us that the more people like something, the more likely it is to be false and kind of trashy, in fact. But it's by its nature, popular media is of any sort is a collection of microcosmic exceptions to the rule which skew negative. Because luckily, civility and goodness are common enough to be wholly unremarkable, right? Now, social media has a lot of stories of goodness and civility and stuff like that, but they are meant to get a visceral emotional reaction, and they are exaggerated in their premise, as far as I see anyway. I mean, we all love puppies, right? Recently, the CBC closed the comments section at its social media platforms to criticism that the public broadcaster was stifling public discourse. Yet, this tacit acknowledgement that open public discussion was doing nothing to embellish public awareness, which implies the CBC was sort of noticing that people weren't really reading the story, they were just reacting to the topic. But was lending voice to those who would subvert public discourse through paroxysms of id, which means people were rage baiting, trolling, etc. What was turning down the heat was a turning down of heat that only a publicly funded media outlet could afford to do. One of the blessings of public supported media is that they can afford to err on the side of caution, whereas a smaller outlet would rely on the engagement, right? While this action does nothing to stop people from being sanctimonious, argumentative trolls, it does mean at least one can read an article, stew in his or her own juices for a minute, and then go about his or her life without becoming trapped in the pointless exercise of talking at cross purposes with everyone in society all at once. We may yet disabuse ourselves of the idea of fruitful, open, and broad-based discussion on all topics and revert to the tradition of discussing within boutique interests in which adherents share some contextual understanding, right? Should people be talking about everything to everyone all the time? In the past, if you were interested in flowers, you got together with people who were interested in flowers. Now you have everybody talking about flowers all the time at each other. The fact is that there is a lot of good culture on social media and plenty of civil discourse. Society has managed in the past few centuries to bring public discourse around to a semblance of reason and sensibility. But we will never achieve consensus on anything, nor should we want to. No idea shines unto itself. It is the process of unnatural selection that allows society to develop a deeper understanding of its guiding principles, and that requires chiaroscuro, setting the light against the darkness. As well, we do not have very good mechanisms outside of trial and error to make wholesale judgments on the quality of the prevailing wisdom, or lack thereof. But too often judgment is made based on mere conformity to cultural norms, the lowest standard of bias and opinion. If you didn't catch what I'm saying here, I'm saying that the process of public discourse is long and it requires exploration, and we don't have good mechanisms in society to come to quick determinations. Often they are played out over years and we don't know what the result of something will be until years later. But the immediacy of social media makes everything so relevant to now, and it must be handled now and settled now. But the problem is we never agree on anything until later. It could be years later, sometimes centuries later. It is no wonder then that the comments section and platforms like Twitter have become society's Thanksgiving dinner conversations, where civility can be overturned at the first off-color remark. Conclusion. In the time before internet-based media, a score of media outlets promulgated the distillation of worldly concerns with the top-down stamp of an authoritative, all the news that's fit to print. The byline, is that the New York Times? I don't know. This condition unified public discourse by narrowing the perspectives, but also served to unify in ignorance, right? You're editing something, you're picking a story, but you're not picking this story. And we all are familiar with the idea of how news programs choose what they want to talk about and they leave what they don't, and a lot of things go unnoticed. The internet is a solution to this problem. We can have people on the ground putting stories up and forward. While social media has broadened perspectives enough to include everything from bad ideas, out-and-out deceit, to far-out conspiracy theories, it has also given range to bona fide concerns the voices of authority had heretofore deemed unworthy. This may yet be society's saving grace. Well, thank you for joining the Apeid's discussion on social media, society media, public media, whatever we're calling it. I hope there are some ideas in there that gave you some food for thought. And while you're here, subscribe and like and, hit the notifications bell. Trying to grow the group of supporters, and I hope you will be one. Thank you for joining. We'll see you all next time. Take care.